Hi, I'm Steve Ledoux, Town Manager here in Acton, and welcome to the Acton Agenda. This is a show about what's going to be on the Board of Selectmen agenda for the upcoming meeting on February 6th, 2017. And this is our pre-Super Bowl game, so our pre-Super Bowl show, so hence, go Pats. With me today is Katie Green. Katie is a member of the Board of Selectmen, and we'll be once again talking about some items that we'll be talking about Monday night. So welcome, Katie, and thanks for coming on.
All right, thanks for having me, Steve.
Okay, so why don't we get started?
So first step, I think, is as always our citizens' concern and the chairman's update and town manager's update. And after that, our first public hearing is on the proposed rules and regulations under Chapter X of our bylaws for the DPW and land use departments.
Right. So back at town meeting, we adopted Bylaw X, which regulates discharge of water into the groundwater and into the storm drain system. It's really a requirement of the US EPA, and without coming up with a bylaw and regulations, we're subject to EPA fines. Mm-hmm. A couple of years ago, Concord, because they didn't have regulations such as this, I think received a $50,000 fine from the federal government. So the engineering department and the land use department have been working on regulations in terms of implementing Bylaw X. So the board will see those regulations on Monday night and either vote to adopt or amend or whatever. So it really is looking at how properties discharge their groundwater, comes up with some fees and fines for non-compliance and things like that. So it's going to be pretty different for a lot of residents, and I think we're going to have to do a lot of outreach and explanation about it, because it's something our businesses, residents have not seen before. But once again, it's kind of a federal requirement under the EPA.
Right, and it sounds like I think those federal requirements keep changing, so we might have to do even some more updates.
I think this is actually the second time that they've changed some of the regs what our bylaws addressing now. But everything is with the new administration, everything's kind of changing, so it's kind of hard to know what's going to happen in the future. Right.
And I think part of the discussion about the regulations is, who will be the implementing authority and what department under there. So I think that's why it's the DPW and land use.
Yeah, and one of the things we had talked about back when we adopted the bylaw was, technically the Board of Selectmen oversee it, but it was kind of our view that land use department with the land use director, who has got a lot of experience with this, would be the kind of the implementer.
Right. Yeah, and he's got great background in the conservation department and other things. So he's really a kind of great fit for this.
Exactly.
Great. Well, so that's one of those technical things that I don't think gets a lot of interest from folks until they actually have to deal with it. So we'll.
It's welcome to my life.
Yeah,
that's the way it is, right?
And so then we'll get into our selectmen's business, and the first issue is for the Board of Selectmen to prioritize the town's CPA, or Community Preservation Act projects.
Right. So this tends to happen about this time every year, where we've got several applications from town departments to the Community Preservation Committee. And as it usually happens, there's more applications than there's money to distribute and bring to town meetings. So the board is being asked to prioritize the projects. We've got a variety of them. I'm probably going to forget some, so it's probably dangerous that I start mentioning them. But there are always some recreation NARA projects. There's a bathroom comfort station proposed at the picnic pavilion. Some additional parking at NARA in anticipation of the rail trail coming in and things like that. So the board will be going through an exercise to prioritize on Monday night.
And again, only the town projects. Their CPA gets a number of proposed projects from private groups and others in town as well. So and then as well as the housing authority and open space set aside, and so there's a lot that they've got to deal with, and then we just look at the town proposed ones. So
exactly.
Okay, so I'll take this next one.
Right.
So it's sort of an issue that I asked to be put on the agenda, and it's the idea of discussing making Acton what's called a safe community, or sometimes called a sanctuary town. So after the election, and just I had some concerns with the rhetoric throughout the election and during the transition, and I think that's only been sort of bolstered by what's happened since the president has taken office. I reached out to Senator Eldridge to ask what we could do in Acton to make sure that we were a welcoming community and recognizing sort of the diversity in our town. And he talked to me about a couple options and mentioned the idea of sanctuary towns, which a number of cities have adopted over the years. Cambridge has been a sanctuary city since the 80s. And a lot of towns and cities are looking into this now. And it really is about just recognizing that we are not going to actively participate in helping ICE with immigration enforcement, sort of above and beyond what we do already. So a lot of this is kind of, our police operate under these practices now because they really are focused on community policing and making sure everybody feels welcome and like they can go to the police if they have an issue, even if they're undocumented. So it just, it recognizes that we wouldn't detain people just based on their immigration status. And, again, it doesn't, if somebody is arrested or stopped for something else and there's a warrant out, for their arrest for a larger issue, the police are going to hold them for that,
Right.
And
Right.
they will send fingerprints to the federal
Right.
government, but they're not going to sort of participate in raids or detaining people longer than they would be for sort of the issue that they've been stopped for. And, again, it doesn't change what we do now, and it doesn't really change how we've interacted with the federal government in the past, but with the changes in the administration and some of the things they're looking into, we just might be asked to do more. And so it's kind of making a statement that we would not.
So do you anticipate, because as you know, we've gotten a lot of emails on both sides of the issue in the last 2-3 days. How do you kind of envision this going? I mean, in other words, do you think there'll be like a warrant article at the annual town meeting or something like that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think that's the direction. It was sort of interesting. I had kind of started pursuing this route, and then another group in town had also organically created and was interested in the same topic. So, I connected with them, and they'll be coming to the meeting to hear and participate in the discussion as well. And so I think a lot, the discussion on Monday night is not to make a decision about whether or not to become a sanctuary town or a safe community. It's really just to talk about the idea and what that process might be if we want to move forward. And I think the most likely answer is that we would have a town meeting warrant article on the topic, because I think it's something that town meeting would have to ultimately decide. So as you mentioned, we anticipate that there will be a number of people both for and against at the meeting on Monday night, so it should make for an interesting discussion.
Yeah, and I'm not really aware at this point of town or any towns really thinking about this. I mean, granted, the last time I was around, some of my fellow town managers was the Mass Municipal Association annual meeting, which was the day of the inauguration. So there was a lot of this discussion hadn't really happened yet.
Yeah.
So I'm not aware. But
yeah, I mean, I know Newton, again, is a city that is looking into it. Arlington, technically a town, I believe, is putting it on their town meeting warrant. So there are a lot of communities that are certainly looking into it, and some that have reaffirmed. Again, Cambridge has been one since the mid-'80s, but they sort of put out a statement reaffirming that they are. Somerville, similar. So there are a lot of communities in Massachusetts that I think are looking into this more and more as a thing. So should be interesting.
definitely be interesting. Probably big crowd.
Exactly. We'll get the extra chairs.
Exactly.
So once they all are, we're done with that, we will consider increasing parking ticket fines.
Right, now we haven't touched our parking fines for quite some time, and it kind of sounds weird. Former Chief Widmeyer, since he retired about 3 days ago, did give us a report with some recommendations. In general, most of the types of fines will be increasing about $10. We did an extensive study of some of our surrounding towns. So the proposal would be to increase the parking about $10, not touching the handicap parking. It's pretty much where everybody else is right now. We also have, and I know this issue came up on Budget Saturday from Selectman Osmond. We have accepted the statute that allows for the handicap parking fines to go into an account to be used by the Commission on Disability. So those fines they'll have access to.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and I think one of the issues we had heard is just with the increase in the parking rates at the train station, the rates and the parking ticket are now about the same. So a lot of people are just parking illegally and taking the ticket if they get it. So
there was an issue, I think, in Boston too, where it was cheaper actually pay the parking ticket than pay for the parking.
Park in a garage is probably still the case.
Yeah.
And then next, update on the Acton Leadership Group.
Right. So as we seem to be talking about this every show, the Acton Leadership Group is I guess a town committee that consists of the chair and vice chair of the Board of Selectmen, 2 members of the Regional School Committee, 2 members of the Finance Committee, 2 members of Town Administration, and 2 members of School Administration. And really, the game plan is several things. One is to arrive at consensus on the budget in regard to how much revenues we have and what the level of expenditure should be, and then also looking at kind of a 3-year look forward, so to speak. So we're kind of at crunch time right now with ALG. We have pretty much consensus on revenues, with the exception of whether the town should tax at the maximum level of Proposition 2.5 or not. The selectmen did reduce my recommended budget at the last meeting. The school committee did a vote number last night. I'm not quite sure how that fits into the ALG plan. We need to run that scenario today. So part of our discussion, and I think we're going to give the Board of Selectmen some options that. What happens if we don't totally tax at the maximum level? What if we just taxed at 2/3 of the maximum level, or 50%, and just show what that does to the bottom line and come up with some options? So we'll be talking about that Monday night, because we do have the ALG meeting on I think it's February 9th, Thursday, February 9th, and at pretty much hopefully will be the crunch time where we arrive at consensus and bring everything back to our boards.
Right. And it's worth noting, when we're talking about taxing to the max, in this scenario, we're still talking about taxing to the 2.5%, but that there's $985,000 worth of sort of unused tax levy from when we haven't taxed to the 2.5%. So it's how much of that to use.
Exactly.
And as you noted, the selectmen did reduce the budget from what was originally recommended, including reducing a couple capital items. And the school committee, their budget that they voted last night was slightly lower than what they had voted on their budget Saturday, although that's mostly just due to the health insurance, right? The Health Insurance Trust voted a 0% increase, and I think they had been budgeting for 4 or 5. So
we had both budgeted for 5. So I think combined between the town and school was a budget reduction about, I think, $350,000 or $380,000 between the 2 of us. So it was a significant savings, absolutely.
Yeah, great. And then the board will discuss the town hall room use policy and regulations.
Yeah, well, we haven't really looked at the regulations for quite some time. It was a little unclear whether I, as town manager, established the regulations or the selectmen, and I'm kind of the philosophy that it is the Board of Selectmen's building, it's not my building, so they should look at it. It really just comes down to who can utilize it. I mean, generally, our rooms are oversubscribed for town boards, but we try to come up with regulations of any activity that's affiliated with the town board or things like that. So just a little tweaking, I think, and hopefully the board will adopt it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a great discussion. I know I've had people ask in the past about using the town hall rooms, and as you mentioned, they're mostly booked up, but
Yeah.
in situations where they're not, it would be good to know
Yeah.
who can use them.
And you know, and a lot of times people can, this use policy doesn't affect the library. The library kind of has their own booking, and you know, they tend to have more community groups, also because they're open on the weekend, so there's more flexibility, and we don't, you know, in our case, we'd have to lock the building, have janitorial and things like that.
Right.
So.
And then the last major piece of business is our dog park committee charge. So we
Right.
discussed this a few
Right.
meetings ago.
Right, so Selectman Osmond was tasked with coming up with a charge for a committee, so the board will be considering that. As you know, it is a big, well, it just seems to be a big issue in town. You know, a lot of communities have been doing dog parks, and you know, it's one of these waves that I remember, like maybe 10 years ago, I was at my national convention, and I went to a workshop where some California cities were talking about dog parks, and I was like, really? Dog parks? And now, you know, here it is here.
Now
So,
yeah, exactly.
exactly.
It's taken 10 years to move across the country. But,
Exactly.
yeah, should be interesting.
Yeah.
And then, as always, we have our consent agenda. I don't think there's anything major on there that we need to bring up, but worth people looking through. I will note one of the things we always have on there is accepting gifts, mostly for the recreation department. We have a lot of generous individuals and businesses
Yeah.
that donate, particularly to our concert series and
Yeah,
our
and the
Independence
fireworks.
Day.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're very grateful.
And
for all of
Maura
that.
Haberman of the rec department, she really goes out and
Yes.
does a lot of fundraising for the town. So.
She does, and I at the Recreation Commission meeting a few weeks ago, or I guess maybe, well, yeah, but a few weeks ago at this point, got a sneak peek of all of their flyers for the upcoming events this summer, and they're pretty good, and there's a lot of interesting stuff coming.
Yeah.
So
And I've been signing all the contracts for the
Oh,
act,
good.
so I'm aware too. Exactly.
yeah, so it should be a good, fun summer for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, that's been Acton Agenda for the Selectmen's meeting of February 6th. I want to thank Katie for joining me on the show. And once again, the Selectmen's meeting will start at 7 p.m. in room 204 of Town Hall on Monday, February 6th. And thank you for watching, and go Patriots.